Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fisherman's Post Saltwater Podcast series. This episode is titled Inshore Flounder Fishing the Crystal Coast, and my guest is Captain Matt Littleton of Friendly City Fishing Charters. He operates out of the Swansboro, Emerald Isle area, and we're going to talk about locations first. Then we're going to do a deep dive into live bait fishing for flounder, and then we'll move over to artificial fishing for flounder. My name is Gary Hurley of Fisherman's Post. Fisherman's Post has been serving the saltwater fishing community of North Carolina since 2003. We've been bringing you fishing reports, fishing tournaments, fishing schools, member content, and here in one of our latest and greatest efforts, the Saltwater Podcast series, where we reach out to captain and guide friends from up and down the North Carolina coast to ask them to share with us their thoughts, their insights on how to catch more fish more often. In this endeavor, I am joined each episode by David Harden of Harden Creative Media.
Gary.
Hey, man.
What's going on?
Not much, man. Going to talk about flounder. Going to talk about that window of flounder fishing we get. We're going to try to set everyone up, at least on the inside. Maybe not the offshore side, but on the inside.
There we go. Ready, set, go.
Ready, set, go.
That's what it's going to be. The mad dash.
Yeah, that's part of what he's going to talk about. He's going to talk about put a big motor on the back of your boat so you can get to the spot first.
That's right.
No, man, we're going to have a good time. We're going to have a good time talking about flounder with Capt Matt.
Cool. Well, before we get started, let's do our sponsors. Let's thank Port City Signs and Graphics.
We love them. We love those guys.
We do. They're great. Good work all over town. All
over town. Yeah, man. I mean, they do good work for me, but it's kind of like the small sample size, man. But I mean, I've done business with them since they started, since their first year. But yeah, man, Sabrina and crew have grown that business, and man, they serve so many small businesses, individuals too, but really small businesses become their niche.
You think you could recognize a sign?
I bat 100% in this game.
Okay, here we go. I'm going to show you two signs. You tell me which one was Port City Signs and Graphics. Here's sign number one.
All right.
Big shout out to my fingers. I can always count on them.
Okay.
So there we go.
I'm not going to make a decision until I see sign number two.
Sign number two is a vehicle wrap for Flores and Foley roofing and sheet metal. And there's a dog on the truck.
Is that a dog or did they make that dog?
I don't know.
Is that a hood ornament or is that an actual dog?
Maybe it's a paper cutout of a dog.
Man, we're belittling their effort, man. Look, it doesn't. I guess the point here is, man, look at Flores and Foley. It doesn't always have to be big. It doesn't always have to be busy. Man, sometimes clean is the way to go too.
That's right.
And depending on the small business owner taste, man, again, Sabrina and crew will meet your needs. Check out Port City Signs and Graphics.
That's right.
Fisherman's Post uses them.
Yep, you should too. Next up, yourboatmoney.com and New Coast.
That's
there you go.
Yeah, man, that's our guy, Scott Bradshaw. And, again, I like the graphic he puts together. Man, maybe you've seen him, man. He's very active in the topsail fishing community, online club community, and really just active in the fishing and boating community, man. That's one of the reasons why we enjoyed partnering with him and try to get the word out. And you know what happens is Labor Day comes and people decide to put up the boat preemptively. Like fall fishing's great, the boating's great, but people still do it. But anyway, man, if you're starting to get in the frame of mind of buying or selling, because the season's over and now you want to make a move, Scott Bradshaw, full of information. All you got to do, reach out with a phone call, reach out online to yourboatmoney.com. Man, there's no obligation, there's no risk. Just start a relationship with Scott, and man, he will help you out if he can. He's that guy.
That's great. Another place you can go to get a boat.
I think I do.
Marine Warehouse Center.
Man, my guys, sales, service, parts, Charleston, Wilmington. Show me an ad, and then I'll talk more about them.
All right, here we go.
Matt with Marine Warehouse, excited to give you guys a huge update. We're now carrying Seabourn and Spider boat line. Of course, we have the newest models of Carolina Skiff, Sailfish, Sea Chaser, and Pan Marine. With over 60 boats in stock at a Wilmington location, let's schedule a sea trial and let's get you on the water today.
So Here's something else I've talked about on this podcast, but I'm going to say it again.
Okay.
So the way I operate is, we use our boat mostly as a family boat all summer. And over the summer, man, I take note of anything that needs to be fixed, repaired, replaced, anything along that isn't working quite right. And then at the end of the season, man, I take that punch list into Marine Warehouse Center and they just knock it out. And it's like my used boat is a new boat again. So maybe you're out there thinking, man, I've taken a couple of hits over the summer. And if you just want to start with a clean slate going into next year, man, take them your punch list, let them help you out.
Good idea.
And I'm gonna keep plugging them just because I'm a big fan. And they got parts there too, and not just parts, but I need a new brush. I got my brush for the top part, but I want to get a little stiffer brush to help knock off some of that film that happens over the course of the summer, even with my bottom painted. Being in the water, I still need to address that bottom of the boat, man. I'm going to go to them and get a stiffer brush stiffer than the one I use up top.
That's right. They got it all.
I'm going to fumble to let you know in advance. You know where this is going. This is going to Terrell's joke, and I'm gonna mess it up. In part, I'm gonna mess it up because it's clunky, and what I'm saying is, it's not good. So if I could lower,
just lower.
I don't know what expectations you have for him at this time, but if I could lower your expectations for Terrell,
okay,
this will go better. Okay.
Let me get in the zone.
Well, he called me.
Okay.
And he was just, sometimes he just BS's with me, just tells me about anything. He was talking about the old days when he was younger. He owned a horse. Did you know that?
I did not know that Terrell owned a horse.
I didn't know that either. And, it's like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, man. People would ask me if my horse was chatty at all. And I'd be like, yeah. Oh, wait, I messed this up. See, I told you. His horse's name was Mayo.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Damn it.
Go ahead.
His horse's name was Mayo, and people would ask if my horse was chatty, and he'd say, yeah, mayonnaise. Damn, I told you I was going to mess it up.
That's all right. And you did. It's okay, though.
Is that self-fulfilling prophecy? Did I make that mess up happen?
Or
did I somehow insightfully know my own fate?
Something to meditate on and for next time.
All right. Well, that's it. That's all I got from Terrell.
That's great. Well, if you like the podcast and like Terrell's jokes, make sure to like and subscribe to our podcast. We would appreciate it.
Yeah, and if you're a fan of the podcast, want more podcasts, or just want to support our podcast efforts, again, we have our premium content membership at Fisherman's Post. And that Fisherman's Post membership gets you early access to all our podcast releases. It gets you exclusive access to bonus podcast content. And if that wasn't enough, you get our weekly audio and video fishing reports delivered. We talk to 11 captains up and down the North Carolina coast, so you stay abreast of what's happening up and down the coast, straight from the captain guide's mouth. And then we also give you access to our More Fish library. That's our library from our annual fishing schools that we host. Lots to do, man. Go to fishermanspost.com.
It's a great deal.
It is a great deal. As far as this podcast goes, though, I'm going to get Matt up. I know he has a lot to talk about with live bait fishing for flounder. He's got some artificial too, but there's a reason we're going to lean in more on live bait, and he's going to tell us about that.
Cool.
But David Harden, I'm coming back to you. When's the last time you caught a flounder?
Oh man, probably last year.
On squid?
Like a legal flounder or like any flounder.
I don't want you to admit to anything. You do not have to.
Well, I didn't keep it if it was illegal. I would, of course, release it because I follow the rules. So let's just say last year.
Well, I'm going to come back to you for David's best takeaway.
Okay.
The best thing you hear Matt Littleton say.
All right, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, man. Well, now it is my pleasure to introduce back to the podcast, returning podcast guest, Captain Matt Littleton of Friendly City Fishing Charters. Again, he operates out of the Swansboro, Emerald Isle area, and we're going to be doing inshore flounder fishing, the Crystal Coast. Matt, welcome back, man. Always a pleasure to talk fishing with you.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I love doing this. I love being with y'all, and anytime I can help somebody else catch a fish, I love it. And
what I like is I know that you mean that. I know you're not just playing to my crowd, which is cool, which is part of the reason. Love having you on the show. Love having you. You're part of our weekly fishing reports that I just sort of plugged in my own podcast. But as fond as I am of you, no one gets on the podcast without answering two questions. You tell me you're ready, I give you question number one.
Lay it on me.
Matt, why should anyone listen to anything you have to say about a flounder?
I've been doing flounder my entire life. I grew up in, families of commercial fishermen and charter fishermen, and catching, gigging. I mean, all things flounder has been much a part of my life as anything I was doing growing up. I mean, we used to flounder gig religiously. It's a big part of my family. And on top of that, I've just been charter fishing for 11 years, and flounder are inevitable when you're doing what I do for a living.
Acceptable answer. Easily an acceptable answer, David. I'm going to proceed.
Okay, I think you should.
Question number 2. I know you like to think you're a Harry Potter expert. I know you like to think you're solid on Harry Potter trivia. And while you bested me the last time we met over Harry Potter trivia, I think I got you this time.
Well, let's do this if you really want to. In front of everybody.
All right. In the movie series of Harry Potter, it's played by actor Daniel Radcliffe. What are Daniel Radcliffe's 2 favorite colors?
This is Daniel Radcliffe trivia, isn't it? Not Harry Potter.
It's Harry Potter trivia. Please answer the question.
Let's say scarlet and gold.
No, blue and yellow. You were close. I had to think about gold and yellow, but it took me a minute to think about scarlet.
I went with the Gryffindor house colors.
So then I don't even need my second question to win, which is what quote by Samuel Beckett, because I know you're well read. What quote by Samuel Beckett does Daniel have as a tattoo? And the answer would be try, fail, try again, fail better. Just in case you got lucky guessing colors, I wanted to have it just so I could win the Harry Potter trivia standoff. 1-to-1 rubber match to be seen soon.
Well, I'm not sure that qualifies as Harry Potter trivia.
I knew blah, 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 blah. Sore loser. Captain Matt Littleton, man, you're going to start by talking about locations, and people get excited whenever anyone says, I want to start by talking locations. I'm guessing we're talking about geographical features, but I'm going to get out of the way and let you talk about flounder locations. Again, Swansboro, Emerald, Crystal Coast flounder fishing.
I guess if we're going to be doing inshore flounder in the places that I really target them the most, it really kind of depends on how you're fishing. So if you're going to be throwing artificials, you're not going to be, if you're throwing a bucktail in deep water around the inlet, you're basically doing what you'd be doing if you were near shore fishing for them anyway. But what I prefer to do is if I'm looking for an area, if I'm artificial fishing, I'm going to be fishing. I can cover a lot more ground that way. If you want to get out in the marsh and you want to start covering bays and covering areas like that, you can just, kind of throw artificials the same way that you would redfish. You can upsize your gear a little bit. I like to make sure that I'm touching the bottom and I'm going to be bouncing off the bottom. And if you're going to be, say, somewhere around the ferry channel in Swansboro or over on the flats behind Emerald Isle, you can just start covering ground with that, throwing artificials. But where the meat of it is and where you're going to find your bigger fish, I love structure. Structure for flounder is one of my favorite things to do. I love going up the White Oak River, the waterway, any of the creeks that come off Queens Creek, all that. If you can find deeper water on a rising tide around structure, that is just a recipe for success with flounder. Okay,
man. So deeper water, rising tide around structure. And so I'm guessing that most people immediately go to docks. So confirm to me docks, but then tell me what else you're thinking about when you think about structure.
It can be anything, really. In the White Oak, you've got all those, and especially, I'm not sure how it is down there around you guys, but in the Coastal Federation's done a ton of work with living shorelines in our area. And on top of just the good work that it does, it creates new structure and habitat. And anything that a flounder can tuck behind, hide behind, lay behind so that he can pop out and grab a bait when it gets flushed by him, that's the kind of structure that I'm talking about. It doesn't have to be a dock pylon. It doesn't have to be, a seawall or anything that might stick out in the water a little bit or create a current. Anything that he can hide behind to pop out after a mullet or a shrimp or anything that's going to get flushed by him, that's the kind of structure that I like to fish around. Oyster rocks will do really good for flounder too. Flounder love to sit on the leeward side of an oyster rock. So if you've got the current breaking, if you've got a rock right here and you've got current breaking on this side, the back side of the rock is a beautiful place for flounder to be.
I was going to ask, man, and you sort of beat me to it. I was going to say, is the flounder's relationship with an oyster rock at all similar to a red drum's relationship? So does a red, just to do a quick digression, does a red drum hang up on that same side or not as much as religiously as a flounder?
Pretty much. Drum are lazy creatures, kind of like they fight incredibly, but in their perfect world, they would sit out of current just where they can find. That's why they're so, when people talk about finding reds along the edge of a marsh grass or a marsh bank, you don't ever really find. I'm not saying that it can't happen, that it doesn't happen from time to time, but a redfish doesn't want to be in heavy current where he's having to constantly work to be there. In his perfect world, a red drum would just be waddling around the shoreline, slurping up a bait or a crab or something that he finds on the bottom here and there and not having to work a whole lot. And most fish are like that. If they can stand not expending a ton of energy to be in a spot they're feeding at, that's where they want to be.
But is the flounder more apt to be in current just because of its construct and being flat and being able to hug bottom and water going over top of them instead of him swimming into it? Or are they like-minded?
No, a flounder is definitely more apt to be in heavy current, but it's going to be situational. If you're around an oyster rock, they're not going to be sitting on the current side of an oyster rock just getting beat by current the whole time if they can be just on the other side of it waiting to get flush bait.
All right. And this, I'm going to ask a few more location questions, and maybe you would talk about this as we move further in the conversation, but just so I don't forget, like for instance, like docks, man, are we talking about out in the deeper water? Are we talking about up by the bulkhead grass line, or it could be anywhere?
It can be in either of them, but that's where it starts you've got to factor in the tide, where redfish are the tide doesn't really matter to redfish as far as their feeding habits. But with trout, the tide is everything on their feeding habits. And you can talk to anybody who's ever flounder gigged a day in their life, and they'll tell you this: that if you're going to hit the water to go flounder gigging, the absolute best time you're going to go is at a rock bottom dead low tide rising. And what happens is as soon as the tide starts to fall out, your flounder fall out into the deep water. Now, not to say you can't go catch them whenever it's like that, but if you're going to be fishing around structure like that, instead of fishing out just on the end of the dock where it's deep, as soon as the tide starts coming in and rising, and the bait's going to be, your bait fish are going to be pushed up on the bank as shallow as they can get because that's where they feel safe. As soon as the tide starts rising up, your flounder are going to start pushing their way into that shallower water as tight as they can get up to it also.
Okay. Next question would be, you mentioned like some of the flats, perhaps the flats behind Emerald Isle. And so if you're pulling into a big flat, like why would people start one place of the flat versus another part of the flat? Like what do you see when you pull onto a flat, or what are you looking for when you do?
A lot of it for me is really just, I want to try to find what looks fishy to me. If I see a point that wraps into a pocket and then comes out into a straight and then ends in another point, that's perfect. I'm just going to set up and fish that. A lot of it's personal preference, and I mean, a lot of it's going to end up being where you have fished before and you start to see patterns in the way fish act. Like there's a couple places in the marsh, there's no rhyme or reason that a flounder should sit there, but I know every time I let people throw artificials across it, we're going to pick one up. And
All right.
that's really, I can give you all the tools in the world, but a lot of this stuff around here, especially around Bogue Inlet, because we've got so many inlets and so much water changing, and a lot of our flats are going to be right there around the inlets that you're going to be fishing. Nothing's going to stay the same all the time, but you're going to have to get out and just put a little bit of legwork in and try to see what you can find and what's holding to it.
All right, man. And I'm sure we're going to come back to location as we talk about the different types, but we're going to move into live bait fishing first. So I guess set us up from the start. People love specifics, and I don't know what that means to you. If we're going to talk about rod, reel, tackle, we're going to talk about bait, but before we head out and figure out how to use it, what is it we're going to use?
Anytime I'm still using the same rods that I am when I'm drum fishing, or any, my general all-purpose inshore rods. It's going to be a 7-foot medium rod, 2,500 or 3,000 reel. It doesn't really matter, just line capacity, but either one will do you the trick. And you can use heavier braid whenever you're fishing around structure, but in my opinion, it doesn't really matter, because the only real way you're going to save yourself from getting broke off in structure is to never get there in the first place. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but if you get a big flounder that wraps you around a pilot on a dock, it doesn't matter, how heavy a line you got or how heavy a leader you're using. You're kind of at the mercy of just hoping you don't hit a barnacle the wrong way.
All right. So rod and reel set up. Then let's go to terminal tackle.
So if I'm fishing live bait around, there's a few different things that I can do whenever I'm doing this. And it really just depends on how much current you've got in the areas that you're fishing. Like in the White Oak River, where a lot of times you're not dealing with like an insane heavy rising current or even a falling tide, but I really like to do most of my flounder fishing on a rising tide. in the white oak especially, you're going to be using something kind of a modified Carolina rig, and everybody's got some sort of variation of this that they use whenever they're live bait fishing for flounder. So the Carolina rig that I tie is going to be a modified rig where the weight is on the leader, and I've got a snelled circle hook on this one. If you're a set it and forget it and you just want to do that thing going for flounder, which I don't think it will be quite as effective, you can do this. You can also do this just in general, but what I usually like to do is it depends on what you're trying to do. I use an SSW cutter hook. That one you're just going to tie on, and then you'll be setting the hook with that fish. I know a lot of people like kale hooks. A lot of people still will use a circle hook. It's really personal preference. If you're going to be setting the hook on a fish, which if you're an avid angler or you're a decent angler and you've got the ability to tell whenever a fish is on your line, nothing's going to give you that feeling like whenever you feel him eat and you bury that hook into his face. And that SSW cutter is really what I like to do for that, because a lot of times, and I'm sure anyone out there has heard, people always say, oh, you got to give that flounder a minute to get the bait in his mouth. You got to let him work on it for a little while and get it in there. I am absolutely not prescribing to that at all. Whenever we're throwing live bait and we're getting that out there, I 100%, the minute that I feel him take that, and you'll feel the difference between whenever he's going after it, whenever he's got it. The minute that I feel it, whenever he's got it, I'm trying to bury that hook in his face so hard there's no way he can ever get it out.
Okay, I got some. Man, I don't know where to start my questions because I do want to talk about the hook set. But let's go back to that leader. So your version of the modified Carolina rig is, it's not that you're putting the weight above the leader, above the snap swivel. It's that you've got it on the leader, but you also have a blockage, so it's not going to get anywhere near the hook.
Yeah, so you've got a set amount. It's just an overhand knot with a bead that's catching that and into that. I'm using 40-pound, either 40-pound mono or some sort of 40-pound hybrid leader, but it all does the same thing, and you're not reducing. I've been using this rig for probably going on 8 years now, and I've never had it fail where the knot in the leader is. We're using, I mean, it's ridiculously oversized gear for fish that are going to be 5 to maybe 10 pounds at best, and we're using 40-pound lines. It's just, there's nothing that's going to hurt that. And one of the reasons that I really like having the weight on there, aside from being able to pre-tie these rigs and go ahead and bag them up so you've got them ready whenever you're hitting the water, I know that anyone who puts the weight on the main line, you've made that cast and you've watched your weight go one way and your bait go flying the other way, especially when you're using a live mullet and something that's heavier than the weight, or might be heavier than the weight, or as heavy as the weight or heavier than the weight. And what happens when you do that is you're giving whatever's on the other line more control than you have over it, because you can't feel what's happening between the weight and the hook.
Okay.
So the less pull that you have there, your fish is only going to get 6 or 8 inches at best before you're going to feel him hit that swivel.
Okay. I still got questions, man. And again, I'll preface it by saying again, it's my belief that people like specifics. So in general, the length of the stopper bead and the hook is what am I looking at? Like 12 inches, something like that?
I usually like to start, you're talking between the hook and the stopper bead, or
Yes.
the entire rig?
This between the hook and the stopper bead.
I'd say about a foot, maybe a little less.
Okay. And then how much play do you give the weight? Is that another foot to the snap swivel, or is it less?
It's probably between 6 and 8 inches. I usually start with about 2 foot of leader whenever when I'm tying the rig up. I start with maybe 2 foot, maybe a little less than 2 foot of leader altogether. And then by the time you've tied your hook on, you've put your overhand knot, and then you've tied your swivel on, you end up with that 16 to 18 inch rig.
And then I'm going to go to the hook and say, I didn't quite understand what the snell part, or the pro or con snell. Is it that you don't like snelling hooks, or is it the hook that you like to use you don't like to snell?
It depends on which hook you're using. If you're using a kale hook or using an SSW cutter hook where you're going to be setting the hook on the fish, there's not really a reason to snell it. Because if you're going to be setting the hook, you're going to be the one actually creating the hook set. If you're going to be using circle hooks, when you snell the hook, it doesn't matter. It's got to be snelled the right way, and I'll hold that up so you can see it. The line needs to be coming out the front of the hook like that when you snell it.
Wow.
What happens is it doesn't matter. At that point, you've made the line and you've made the hook an extension of the line, and you've created a funnel so that whenever the fish picks that up, it doesn't matter how he has it situated in his mouth. It's always going to turn at the last second and catch.
Okay.
So if you're going to be fishing a circle hook, you should be snelling it, because that way you're guaranteeing a hookup. Even a flounder where they're finicky and they might pick it up, they might decide they don't want it, something's weird going on, they're going to spit it out. If he gets that hook in his mouth and he turns his head one way or the other, he is getting hooked.
All right, I follow that now, and that's what I followed before. I just wanted to clarify for myself and others. Then my last question, and I'm not quite sure how to ask it. So as far as the egg weight goes, like I'm guessing it depends on how much current you have, or maybe even the depth of water. But ultimately, what's the goal? For the bait to kind of hang where you put it until you decide to move it, or you expect and want, and it's desirable to have some play, and so you don't want it too heavy of a egg weight?
It kind of depends on what your plan is for where you're at. Like if I'm around a dock where I'm going to be doing a lot of pitching, I'll downsize my egg weight because I just need it to get to the bottom. And if I just need to get to the bottom so that I can drag it across the bottom, then I'll have a weight that's easier to pitch. Trying to pitch a 3/4 ounce egg weight's not really, you don't have a ton of control over that. So if you downsize it to where you're just going to be getting it just on the bottom and then dragging it across the bottom to you, that is going to be a downsize. Now, if I'm just it's a less effective method, but if you're going to be just casting and waiting with a live mullet on around structure, then a circle hook, you're going to want a heavier weight so that wherever you put it, that live mullet's going to stay there.
Okay. I follow that rationale. Well, I mean, I think we've completed the terminal tackle, the rod set up. So now, and this isn't the good old days when flounder fishing existed longer. So for this 2 weeks in September, and it seems like that's the pattern we've been on, we'll be on, we'll see. Man, talk to me about bait. When you're talking live bait in September, first half of September, what are you talking about?
Mullet, finger mullet every day of the week and twice on Sunday. That should be your go-to bait whenever you're flounder fishing in our area. And the preferred way that I like to use the mullet is live. I mean, you got to, anything live and distressed on a hook is what that flounder's after. So I prefer using the SSW rig, where it'll be the modified Carolina rig, but you're going to have that SSW cutter hook on the other end of it. And you'll hook that mullet, and I'm sure we've talked about this before, but a mullet right where his gill plates meet under his chin, you're just going to take that hook and you're going to go between those two gill plates and pop it right out the top of his head. And that's going to be, you're going to make your cast and then just barely drag that thing across the bottom. I mean, like barely dragging it across the bottom. And then the closer you get it to you, you can speed up. I mean, once you get off the bank a good ways, or once you get away from your structure, you can kind of speed it up some. But I love to just sit there and pitch around old broken up docks, drop offs, edges of places, just sit there and drag a mullet across the bottom. And whenever you, like I said, there's a distinct difference between whenever he's playing with it or something else is playing with it, whenever he's got it. And whenever you feel that grab and he's trying to get this thing in his mouth, that's whenever you go ahead and rip that hook.
And I guess what I'll say is bigger baits equal bigger fish. Like, what's your ideal finger mullet?
Anything in that 4 to 6 inch range. I'm not saying that, it's kind of a weird way to, a bigger bait will catch a bigger fish, but you start to kind of get into that point where once you get to those corncob mullets that are just a little, I mean, in my mind, what I would think is almost too big, you're talking, it's going to have to be a big flounder that's going to eat that. It's not like you're just going to pick up any, a big bait will catch the big fish, but it's because a small fish probably knows he can't swallow that, get it in his mouth and do it successfully.
Okay. Then my next bait question is, you mentioned, sees that a finger mullet distress, man, that's going to work. So is it important to have like lively baits, or no, you don't need a lively bait. You just need a bait that's alive?
Kind of just one that's alive. I've caught a lot of flounder on mullet that were not doing that great on the hook. Because a lot of it, you're going to be in murky water a lot of times, especially in the white oak, or if you're fishing, the very beginning of a rising tide somewhere, you're not going to be dealing with the cleanest water a lot of times. So as long as you got a mullet on there that's alive and you're pulling him, you're kind of just trying to get the mullet in front of him.
Okay. So you already started talking about dragging it back slowly, like real slowly. And you've been saying like this, the start of the rise. And so again, to reiterate, I think what you said before, the start of the rise, because some areas are just getting covered up with water, and that's going to be desirable for the flounder and desirable for you to target because you're targeting the flounder moving up there.
Right. So especially a lot of places in the White Oak, which is where, most of my fishing happens in the White Oak and right there behind the hammock in Swansboro. You're going to be, if I'm pitching baits around structure in the White Oak, I'm going to be looking for the busted up docks. I'm going to be working them on the rising tide. And a lot of times the flounder, they'll follow baits off the docks. They'll follow things off the docks and they'll kind of be out away from them sometimes. So you're fishing around structure. It's not, you don't have to be right on it the entire time. So what I'll do is get up. We're going to throw, if I've got a group of people on the boat, we'll go ahead and get our mullets out and hook them up. And we're just going to pitch out and everybody start covering the ground and just start pulling them to you very slightly around these edges or around these docks and all these structures. And what I generally tell people is that if you think you're going slow enough, go a little bit slower. And that's where you'll find your sweet spot at, because you're just trying to give the more time that mullet's in the water dragging the bottom, the more presentation time you're giving the fish. The faster you're working it, the further away and the quicker from the fish you're getting it quickly, especially if you've got a flounder who's just catching a glimpse of it and deciding he's going to come after it. You want to try to give him as much opportunity as possible to come after that bait.
So as someone who's spent a lot of time taking people, out to catch flounder, how do you guide them on what to expect or when they should be, their radar should be up that they might be dealing with a flounder and not maybe an oyster coming back or some other, discrepancy in a smooth return?
I always tell everybody, if you can, most people can tell the difference between when they've got some sort of fish on and whenever it's going to be an oyster rock or something that they're grabbing. But the flounder, whenever they're on, almost the dead giveaway every time. If you've got something or if you've got something else, whenever they've got a hold of it, your line's going to start going side to side one way or the other. It's not going to be that, like right where you cast it at, it's not coming back in a straight line. So once they're on, and a flounder feels for the most, once you start getting into big flounder, they fight like a bulldog. But once you're dealing with once you're dealing with just your average flounder, they feel like a wet towel coming in. Like you can tell there's a fish on there, but it's not like anything you are familiar with, the way a trout or a red drum or anything else would fight. It's almost a subtle bite, but it happened and it's there. So then you just rip the hook on that, and then almost always it'll be game on right on top of that.
So when I guess I could ask this twofold. So when you're working a dock or you're working, a grass line on a flat or, in the river, man, how much time do you spend at a place before you think to yourself, you know what? we're going to pick up and go to another spot.
Flounder's a little different than most everything else because, like, typically drum fishing, I'll do 2 rounds of baits, 4 rods, 8 baits in the water. If we do 2 full rounds of baits and nothing hits, we're going to move. If I'm black drum fishing, we'll do 3 rounds of baits on shrimp. If we don't pick up a black drum, we're going to move. Trout fishing, similar, if we keep doing float, if I know I'm there on the right tide and everything and it doesn't happen, do about 3 or 4 floats and then move. Flounder, I'll give it a little extra time. Just because, this is like stalking and hunting in its purest form for fishing. A lot of these places where the structure are, there's going to be flounder there. It's not to say you might make 3 casts that the same fish is going to be watching the entire time before he finally decides that he's going to commit to it. So I'll give it, I don't know, I'll probably give it like 30 minutes without feeling anything at all. If we fish the same spot for a half hour and absolutely nothing has happened, we'll move on.
Okay. I follow that. This other question sort of popped into mind while you're going, and it's like, so if you're at a spot and you pick up a couple of short ones or smaller ones, whatever, is that typically what you're going to find in that location? Like sizes hang together, or no, there's no rhyme or reason to that?
In my experience, not really. There's some places that I feel like continuously do have bigger fish, but I've caught 5-pound flounder right next to, shorties as hard as I could go. I've been out gigging before, on oyster rocks, and you'll see a bunch of fish that all look like they're the same 14, 15 inch size. And then next thing you know, there's a doormat laying right there beside the rest of them.
For my audience who, is, we'll just imagine is going to try to take advantage of at least a handful of days of the flounder season and, looking at one per person. So if they're looking to target, a bigger fish instead of numbers, how does this conversation change if it's like a trophy, a 5-pounder versus 8 2-pounders?
In my experience with them, the closer you get to heavier current and like heavier current and deeper water seems to usually produce bigger fish. Like the Coast Guard Channel around Emerald Isle, the docks and Cedar Point. There's definitely big fish that come out of the White Oak, but I feel like it's less predictable up there than it is in those areas. The docks and Cedar Point, you can sit there and just cover that. The deeper current or the deeper water and stronger current around structure is usually, I feel like, where you're going to find the bigger flounder. Okay.
And then another question that comes to mind just from past days of flounder fishing, like if I feel like I definitely was negotiating with the flounder and maybe he just didn't commit, and I pulled it away before we could seal the deal, do I go right back to that spot, man? Is that something like, hey, I'm just going to give him another look, even if I might have like stung him real quick or something like that? I mean, what's their learning curve like? Go right back and just see if you can get him again.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really just how aggressive they're feeling that day. But there is that. My grandpa used to always say that big fish don't get big by being stupid. So sometimes if you stung him, he decides he doesn't like it, and that might just be it. But if you're not going right back after him, you'll never know.
If I'm looking for a bank to target, like say up on the flats, is it similar to red drum fishing where if I see bait, then that's where I want to go, or bait's constantly moving and those fish are stationary, so following bait is not going to lead you to a red drum. To a flounder.
Absolutely, just like red drum fishing, especially whenever you're on artificials. I mean, if I'm in the marsh, I prefer to be somewhere where you're working like, this is where things start to change a little bit, because once you're in the marsh, they're still going to follow that low tide rising pattern as far as getting how shallow that they can. But I love a falling tide in front of a creek mouth in the marsh. If you've got like a little feeder creek, say in like Spooner's Bay, there's a bunch of little feeder creeks that are just dumping all over the place there. Any one of those little feeder creeks on a falling tide, love throwing a mullet way up in the creek and then just working it back through the mouth of it is prime time for flounder in the marsh.
All right. I like that too. God. So I wanted to go back, and you led with this pretty early in the episode, and because it does come up a lot. So if here's what I think of like one of the classic flounder bites for me. I'm coming and all of a sudden, I feel something, and then I sort of slowly lift up my rod and I feel weight. Sometimes I even feel it pull it back down. Set the hook. Like anytime you have indication that something live is on the end, set the hook.
Absolutely. I'm of the opinion that the flounder's definitely working on the bait, and he's definitely, if you are going to give him time, you need to just about free spool it. Give him limp line so that he can work on it, because fish might be stupid and they might be primal, but they know how to stay alive. And if he's pulling on a mullet and that mullet's unnaturally pulling away from him, he knows that something's wrong. And that's where a lot of people, they'll end up missing fish because they want to stay tight because they want to feel that there, and they want to feel like they know when it's time to go. But if you're going to give them time, you need to just about open the bail and let them take it, and then give them a minute and then come back and come tight on it. But for the most part, as soon as they figure out something's wrong, that's when they're going to dump the bait. And they're not going to know that something's wrong as soon as they've made that first commitment bite to it. Once they've like made the commitment to take that thing and get it in their mouth, that's when it's go time. And you'll miss a couple fish doing that because they haven't fully committed to the bait. But in my time doing it, I've seen a lot more success doing that than I have just waiting and hoping he's going to take it all the way, get it into his gullet, and then realize that I've got this in my mouth now, and then somebody's setting the hook. Rather than just the minute he's got that whole mullet in his mouth, you rip that hook and bury it in his face.
Okay. So I've ripped the hook, and I've got a hook set, and I'm now engaged. And so I'm sure, on your boat, when you have clients, some of mixed, background, experience, ability, what is it that, how is it that you coach them once they're tight to a flounder, and what is it that they want to do, and what is it that they definitely don't want to do?
There's a little more skill. It's almost like you're trout fishing, because you know how a flounder shakes. As soon as he can get his mouth out of the water, he's going to start just going haywire with it. So you definitely want to keep your rod tip high to begin with when you're fighting the fish, bringing him to the boat. But then as soon as you start to get in that make or break point, whenever he's close to the boat, the big thing with a flounder is that you've got to keep him in the water so that he can't shake the hook. Because the second he gets his head out of the water, it's up to God what's about to happen, because that fish is going to shake as violently as anything you've ever seen to get that hook out. And a lot of times, just the way a flounder's mouth is shaped, even if you've got a really good hook set on him, he can still shake it out. Even if you've got a kale hook or a circle hook wrapped around that bone on the bottom of his jaw, the way he's going to shake his head when he comes out, he'll manage to shake it if you give him enough time doing it. So you've got to change the angle of your retrieval, where you're going to have the rod tip up where you got the power on the fish to begin with, but then you're just going to roll the rod down. You're not going to point the rod at the fish. You're still going to keep that angle at him, but you're going to roll the rod down and just about put your rod tip towards the water. But the key is to make sure you're almost going to turn sideways when you're fighting him. And if you turn sideways like that when you're fighting him, that's going to keep your rod tip bent, so you've got power against the fish, but it's going to keep that angle of your, say you've got a flounder down here, your rod tip's up here. If you're keeping the rod tip high the whole time, he's going to come to the rod tip. So you're going to bring him out of water. But if you're fighting him and you turn the rod low, you're going to keep that angle a lot lower so that he has to stay underwater the majority of the time that you're fighting him.
I mean, I follow that. That's great advice. I'm glad I asked that question. Then my next question is, what do you need to tell the person when they get that fish just about ready to go into the landing net? And I'd like you to, you don't need the advice, but who's ever hearing this, what's the advice for the angler? What's the advice for the net person?
What I always tell everybody to do is, when you think he's ready and you think we can get a good shot at him with the net, it's got to be quick, because like I said, as soon as his head comes out of the water, it's going to be, Shake City, and he's going to try to get off that hook. So usually what I'll do is, as soon as the flounder comes off the ground and you've got him right there beside the boat, I'm going to have him reel down and lift up just enough that it's going to turn his head up so that I can get his head in the net and then sweep the rest of him in.
All right. I follow that.
But it's got to be an understood exchange. Most of if you just go into it with a plucky attitude, you got to be on the same page when it's happening. Whenever you reel down and lift, your netman's got to be ready to go ahead and stab him real quick.
So the mistake comes in pulling it out and not being ready with the net, or having the net in the water too much, and it sends the flounder out of a predictable pattern.
Right. And if you've got the net in the water trying to anticipate the flounder, you're almost always going to miss him, because he's going to see the net and he's going to turn off of it one way or the other. And when you've got the net in the water, you're not going to be able to turn the net like you want, because you're just so much slower in the water. But if the flounder, your man on the reel gets the flounder's head out of water too quick before you got the net ready, you're in that danger zone of him shaking the hook.
All right, I follow. Hey, so here's where we are with the podcast, man. We are coming to the end of our time together, and what we're going to do is we're going to push our conversation of artificial fishing for for flounder to our bonus content. So we're going to wrap this podcast up. We're going to finish it with this live bait fishing for flounder exclusive. And so with this being the end of the official podcast, man, what did we not talk about when it comes to live bait flounder fishing? I mean, I think we went back and forth pretty quick. I think we covered plenty of information, but I certainly don't want to say goodbye until I've given you the floor for anything you thought we should talk about, thought you might talk about, and it just didn't come out organically.
No, I think we covered a ton of ground. I mean, you're definitely, if you're going to go for those trophy flounder, you're going to be in that deeper current, and you're going to be in, deeper water, heavier current. You're going to have to upsize your rig. You're going to have to, if you're trying to fish, around the docks in Cedar Point, or you're trying to fish around the Coast Guard Channel, or some of those places where the current's heavy, if you could just go there with a 3/4 ounce egg weight that's done you just fine in the White Oak River, you're going to see that you can't keep your bait where you want it to. You're not going to be able to keep it around the pylons, and you're just going to be trying to fight that the whole time instead of making sure you're actually fishing. So it never hurts to just keep extra weights on the boat, because you're not going to have to retie your whole rigs, or however you do it. Everyone's got their own version of a flounder rig they like, but as long as you've got something to keep the weight on the bottom with a direct line to your hook so that you can feel that's going to be fine. If, I'm out there with a 3/4 ounce egg weight on this and I realize it's not going to be enough, cut the swivel, put the weight you need on, tie it back on, and get back out there. It's really important to have the right equipment and know how to fish the equipment that you got whenever you're live bait flounder fishing, because whenever you do get the hit that you want to make sure that you're ready for it and that you're prepared for it, instead of, oh, what should I have done, different with that circle hook? Did I not set the hook the right way? Did I not pull this? Was I drifting too far over? Just make sure you've got all the right equipment, and if you need to change, pop it out real quick and get after it.
As you were wrapping it up, I was thinking about, I knew there was a question that I just wanted to ask and I just forgot to ask it. So even though that seemed like the end of the podcast, it's not. All right. So is there ever, and this might be a short answer, is there ever an instance where you're drifting, you're not anchored up, and is there a difference in your mind at all to being anchored or being on spot lock or power pole?
It depends on the water you're in. If you're drifting, say, through like Brown's Inlet, or you're drifting through, the front area of Bogue Inlet, I want the trolling motor in the water because I want to be able to just rapidly change if I need to, or if I get hooked up to a fish and a lot of current, we need to move the boat for some reason, or usually when I'm in deeper water, I want spot lock on. But if you're going to be spot locking somewhere in the White Oak or in the marsh or anything like that, you're just going to be turning bottom up and making all kinds of ruckus that is not going to do well for your fishing that day. Anchoring, I really don't like to anchor unless I'm just going to be in deeper structure, or I'm going to be fishing like deep structure that's going to be straight down, which most of the time that's going to be if you're like jigging a rock ledge like the Key Post, or you're somewhere out there in the ocean, then you want to make sure you're anchored right up over where you need to be. But for the most part, I'm going to be on the power pole in the White Oak the most time. Like if I'm in the White Oak, I'm going to be on the power pole. If I'm in the marsh, I'm going to be on the power pole. Drifting somewhere like Brown's Inlet, which I know we didn't cover a lot of drift fishing, but I've gotten away from drift fishing for flounder as much. It just, to me personally, hasn't seemed like it's been as productive as just covering area and covering structure.
Okay, that was sort of the vibe I got, but I wanted to make it official by asking you. So now we are officially at the end of our inshore fishing for flounder on the Crystal Coast. Matt Littleton, Friendly City Fishing Charters, Swansboro, Emerald Isle area. Man, thank you for your time. Thank you for your expertise, man. Thank you for sharing with us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I love doing it.
All right. And we'll come back to you and talk more about artificial flounder fishing as soon as we wrap up this podcast.
All right. Sounds good.
Well, David Harden,
Gary Hurley.
man, we were doing a back and forth. I think we covered more ground in 40 whatever minutes than I normally do.
That was a lot. That was a lot of good stuff, though.
Man,
a lot of good stuff.
I knew, man, he's good. I knew he had a lot to share, and what he said up front is true, man. He does, like, I've seen him at the fishing school, on the podcast, on the weekly reports. Man, he is motivated to help. He enjoys helping people catch fish, and it's one of the, reasons I value the relationship with him.
That's great. Well, one of the things that really stuck out to me was a piece of advice that I got when I first started flounder fishing.
Oh.
And it's completely counter to what everyone says. It's like, okay, when you think you've got a flounder on, you got to let him eat it. So count to 10. That was the first piece of advice that I got. And then
who gave you that? Let's call them.
I know we should. I forget who it was. It might have been my dad. Who knows? He was fishing with squid too. Just the piece of advice is, if you feel like you've got a flounder on your hook, go ahead and set that hook. You're much better off than letting them chew on it and then swallow it.
I got to say, yeah, man, I know there's two camps, but I'm pretty firmly in Matt's camp too. And it was one of my captain friends said, like, you're going to tell me the flounder's going to finally get a bait in its mouth, and then it's going to go to the trouble and the risk of losing its bait to roll it around in its mouth and scale it before it eats it. Like, that's what you're going to tell me a flounder's going to do after it has that bait in its mouth. It's going to take that risk and that time. And when it's put like that, then I think more people start to slide over to the Matt Littleton side of that equation too.
That's right. I also appreciated his landing net advice too, because one of the things that I will never forget is the look in my nephew's eyes when I lost a flounder, and he looked at me like I was like the worst person in the world, which of course I felt that way.
What mistake did you make? You kept the net in the water too long?
The net was in the water, and it just like spooked him, and he just took off.
Well, David, this has been a great podcast, man. I like your best takeaways, and let's wrap it up and make it official.
That's great. Let's thank our sponsors one more time. Port City Signs and Graphics. yourboatmoney.com, and New Coast and Marine Warehouse Center. If you are a fan of the podcast and enjoy the content, make sure to like and subscribe.
Yeah, man, I love the sponsors we have associated with our podcast. I think it's a beautiful fit. And again, man, we've got premium content membership with podcasts and other benefits. You just go to fishermanspost.com and check out more about it. We'd love to have you as a member.